Pshat with the Kohen Gadol, I always thought that was Pshat.
Yeah.
I never knew he said it.
He said it. He said it so beautifully.
It's printed?
Yeah, I'll send you. He says, they can tell me the whole years of regulars for Kohen Gadol. It makes no sense. No, the key, it's all based on. Generally, the whole thing that all the Simcha and Mikdash is really based on that. He said that's why really on Shabbos we don't say generally. As far as it says, we don't say Shabbos Yisrael Malchus because it's a yontif of Simcha. Is I Nusach starts. I we say it. We say it by Musaf. We say it by Musaf. It's Mikdash because Simcha is Lifnei Hashem. But also the words of Ramban there, because he talks about he coming to Knesset and raising your voice in Tefillah. What's he talking? It's mamish the same words in the nowadays. What? We finished our lessons.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Bruchim Abayim, welcome. I want to particularly welcome all the new faces who are gracing us this morning, but of course never taking for granted all the regular faces which grace us every morning. Gemara does a machlokes, what's greater, Tadir or Mekudesh, Tadir or Chaviv? Zamayla and Tadir, Zamayla and Chaviv. Welcome to everybody. I wanted to Sai Tadir and Sai Chaviv. We finished yesterday this Maimon that we were learning. I don't know if finished, at least it started. I don't know if we finished, but we started. But I wanted to focus on a few lines that we didn't have a chance to explore so much. And is fundamental to understand in this whole picture that we have been exploring. If you take a look at page Nun Gimel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines from the top. The first word on the line is She'esh Seidef. She'esh Seidef, yeah. And then there's a Chuli period. He's exploring here what happened by Avram Avinu, where they threw him into the fire. He didn't think he won't be burnt. If he thought he wouldn't be burnt, it wouldn't have been called a test. He thought he'll be burnt. So he says, as I just read a few lines. Abnam Yadua Hateva begematria lekim. The word Hateva, which is nature, is the same numerical value as a lekim. Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem, which is 86. This says already in Kabbalah, in Pardes. Vahainu. Shekol ha'hatboyis sheba'olam zorak me'alavushim v'asterin l'shem alakim. Hatboyis comes from the word teva, but it means all the imprints. Matbeya shetovu chachamim. The word coin, matbeya, is also the word teva. Stamped, it's minted, it's fixed. That's what the Gemara says. Kol ha'meshanim mimatbeya shetovu chachamim. Somebody who changes from the text, the matbeya, the coin that the chachamim sealed and printed. And that's really what the word teva means. You say, this is nature. You can't fight nature. It's fixed. The sun rises here, sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. Whatever we call teva is basically follows and is governed by the laws of nature, which science tries to explore, and sometimes has explored extremely successfully for the benefit of mankind, which is why we can drive cars safely. Black ice you got to be careful with, and we could fly in planes safely and travel in boats safely, at least relatively, and all of this is because of exploring the laws of nature, which we trust, we rely on them, they're consistent. They haven't failed us, or usually do not fail us. So he says, Kol hatboyas sheba'olam, all the hatboyas in the world, zehurak me'alavushim v'astedim d'shem elikim, is a result of the garments of the levushim and the concealments of what we call elikim. Shayidei nasi ribui hayischalkos v'hagbola. What elikim did to the energy, to the divine energy, which is infinite, is it created endless diversity, and endless diversity and limitation. The channel, the energy is now limited. It's channeled, as we explained many times. Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei represents undefined, infinite, pure, pristine divine energy, and Elikim channels it. It gives it a shape. It models it. It contains it. It obscures it. It restricts it. But as a result, it channels it also to the next level as the teacher who has to channel his insane brilliance in a way that students can absorb it in their vessels. So the cup is called a keli, and it gives shape to the water, it contains it, it limits it, and allows a person to drink from it in a much, you have access to it in an easier way. Yeah. Those are called kelim. So essentially, without Elikim, there would be no hischalkus, no diversity. There would be no hagbola, there would be no finiteness. All of nature is based on what? Diversity. The laws of chemistry, the laws of biology is all about diversity. It's understanding the unique functionality of every cell, of every atom, of every molecule, every limb, every organ, every tissue, its uniqueness, and the laws that govern it, how it functions. It has its parameters, its hagbola. That's called hischalkus and hagbola. Ha'esh yisrif v'amayim yichba. Fire burns, and water extinguishes the flames. Zet tivoi cham, zet tivoi kar. This has the nature of heat, this has the nature of coldness. These are the results of the underlying composition of every single existence in our planet and entire universe. Avol mitzat shem havaya shubchinas bilti gvul. But from the perspective, from the experience of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which represents infinity, ein shabchinas hagbola v'schalkus, the mayim ve'eshkla. So there's no finiteness, and there's no diversity of fire and water. If Elikim was not brought into the picture, so there's no characteristics that are fixed. Water has to be like this, fire has to be like this. Okamoy, that's the depth of the story of Reb Chanina ben Dosa in Maseches Tainis, I think Chafei, Misha Amar L'Shemen v'yadlik, Yom L'Chaimitz v'yadlik. Right, his daughter was very, very distraught. It was Shabbos. Reb Chanina ben Dosa generally was very poor. And she really wanted to light Shabbos candles. She thought it was oil, it was really vinegar. They couldn't afford oil. Oil was a nice food. But vinegar they can have, you know. Whoever gave them chaimitz. And she made a mistake and she lit it. And she realized her mistake and she wept. And her father nonchalantly just said, well, I don't know if it was nonchalantly, but that doesn't say in the Gemara. But her father just said, Misha Omar l'shemen v'yadlik yom l'chaimitz v'yadlik. Whoever said that the oil should burn will say that the vinegar should burn. So we look at it as, okay, fine. Reb Chanina ben Dosa is untehit. And the Gemara continues that the vinegar burned. But what was he saying? So everybody should start lighting Shabbos candles with vinegar. And what's the Misha Omar? Misha Omar l'shemen v'yadlik. The one who said to oil that it should burn will say l'chaimitz v'yadlik. What he was saying is, he was explaining to his daughter, he was giving her a shiur. He was teaching her something. He said it in one line. Gemara, everything is in one line. Very succinct, but it captures an idea. He was telling her that there's different ways of looking at the world. I know about Chaimitz. If he wouldn't know the difference of Chaimitz and Shemen, then he wouldn't say Misham. He knew that Shemen burns and Chaimitz doesn't burn. If he wouldn't have known that, he didn't live in a different universe. He wouldn't have told her. Whoever told Shemen, he knew the problem of Shemen and Chaimitz. What he was explaining to her something. Ukemoy mayim ve'esh eina mechaben zeh. Kamay mirazal al pasuk hamshel lepachad imay oyser shalom b'mroimov michol sar shamayim gavriel sar shleisher mechaben zeh. The Medrash says oyser shalom b'mroimov. Hu yasa shalom. He makes shalom in the heights. Hu yasa shalom aleinu. What's the connection? Because oyser shalom b'mroimov mara means the heights, sublime, the heavenly, like mimarim or bamarim yilamdu alav aleinu schos. Oyser shalom b'miraymov, which is one of the great mantras of Judaism. We say it every day, 3 times a day after Shemona Esrei. He makes shalom b'miraymov. Where's miraymov? In the heights. In the heights, in the higher places, higher realms. B'marim. So Chazal say, the Medrash says on this, that Michal is the minister, he's the guardian angel, so to speak, of water. And Gavriel is fire. Those two should always be at war with each other. Nonetheless, they work perfectly in peace because it's b'miraymov. They work together. Hu yasa shalom aleinu. If we can only get a glimmer of that consciousness, somehow we can also make peace between husbands and wives, between nations, between countries, between cultures, between tribes, between siblings, etc. Zwischen Yidden, zwischen nicht Yidden. Yasa shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Well, what's the idea? Why do they get along? Mayim and Eish are not supposed to get along. Mayim and Eish, one wins. If the fire is more powerful, it will evaporate the water. And if the water is more powerful, it will extinguish the flames. No brilliant scientist has figured out a way of fire and water coexisting in full momentum and intensity. I told you the word from, I think, the Ksav Sofer. It says in Gemara in Brachas, Haroya Gdeira B'chaloim Yitzapel L'Sholem. If you dream about a pot, I don't know who dreams about pots, but if you dream about a pot, you should anticipate peace. What's the shaykhs? What's Psamad Nazach? So the Ksav Sofer, I think, one of the G'dayli Yisrael from the previous generation, I think it was the Ksav Sofer I saw. He says, because that's what a pot does. Fire and water are never going to coexist. Never. Never. It's impossible. What does the pot do? The pot creates what we would call a mechitza. A mechitza. Suddenly with a mechitza, the water is intact. It's intact, and the fire is intact. And the pot absorbs the heat of the fire, cooks the water or whatever else, the dish, the food you put into the pot, or the water in the kettle. And the Eish now contributes beautifully, and the Mayim contributes beautifully, and each adds to the puzzle their unique contribution. So when you see a pot, you see Challah. Not every mechitza in the world is a source of division. Sometimes removing a mechitza is the source of division, because the Mayim and Eish will kill each other. Sometimes the greatest thing you can do for peace is create proper boundaries. Build. Church and state is separated in this class. Shalom b'mraimov. Sometimes you got to build a wall, yeah. That's the concept of a mechitza. In shul also. Sometimes people struggle a lot. I mean, not in these circles so much. But, I go around. People, it's a very difficult concept. Churchill called it the Iron Curtain. Yeah, the Iron Curtain from the Soviet Union. He called the Iron Curtain, Masach HaBarzel. The Iron Curtain came down after the Second World War, Vizel. And the planet was plunged into a Cold War. So often we look at the wall as a horrible thing. The Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain, etc. You have to know the context. What is the function of the wall? If the function of the wall is to suppress freedom, you can't go from West Germany to East Germany, or mainly from East Germany to West Germany. You cross a wall, you get shot. You can't leave the Soviet Union. So then what's the function of the wall? To crush what we would call in this mime a real Hester. I really want to block you. But then there's the wall of the pot. It's not there to block the fire, block the water. It's there to channel. It's a completely different function. Its function is not Hester. Its function is Gilui. I was once speaking in it was a very, what you would call a very liberal crowd, very Jewish, liberal, secular crowd. So they're asking questions. So one of the questions was about a mechitza. Why in Orthodox shuls do they have a mechitza? It seems so male chauvinistic. Women are second-class citizens behind walls. So I said, how do you know the women are behind the walls? Maybe the men are behind the walls. Who decided who's behind the wall? But certain shuls, it's very obvious. You know. Some shuls not, but some. So it became a very, very heated discussion. It seems so ancient and archaic and comes from a different era when women were not seen as people. They were just subservient to their husbands, but now is a feminist age, etc. So I said to them, I want to ask you a question. Just tell them a question. There are many people who are married with families. There are many people, especially today, who are not married. They're married, they're divorced. They got married, they got divorced. Sometimes you have widows, you have widowers. Sometimes you have people married without children. You have a lot of it. And you have a tremendous amount of singles. Women or men, wherever they go, in terms of communities, most events, or at least many, many events, are very family-oriented. You go to a game, you sit with family. You go to a concert, you sit with family. You go to a bar mitzvah, I'm talking in their circles, a reception, a wedding, a bat mitzvah, whatever it is, family. Husbands, wives, children, family. And very often singles, especially older singles, people who are divorced, they struggle, they always feel out of place. Family, and especially Jewish events, are so family oriented. Don't you think there should be one place in the world where people don't have to feel the emotional pressure? I'm not with my husband, I'm not with children, I may not have a husband, I may not have a wife, we may have just been through a horrible divorce, or there's a difficult conflict, or I never found a spouse, or there was a death in the family. Shouldn't there be one place where people can just be there themselves without the need to feel the pain or the pressure of not being part of a larger social unit, which we call a family? There used to be one place like that. It was called a synagogue. The synagogue, the focus of the synagogue was you and God alone. Or in other words, the focus was your naked self, the way you are when you were born, before you tied yourself into larger. There's moments of family, there's moments of community, there's moments together. But prayer is an intimate moment between you and God yourself, not judged by anybody else, not looking at anybody else. You're praying to your God without any strings attached. There used to be one such place. And therefore, if a person was a single, they could feel as comfortable because they didn't have around them other people who were part of their family. Everyone in shul was on their own. And that place was also taken away. There's no place a single woman, a single man could come and not right away feel, I'm different, I didn't make it, I'm not successful. In God's eyes, we also need this type of unit, and if not, something of value is missing. I said, I find the mechitza to be one of the most humane institutions, especially in today's world, in order to be able to help people, give them that sacred space where, yes, there's moments when it's not about husbands and wives sitting together. Everyone is alone, naked as a child in the presence of God, like when you were born. I said, I think if you were really sensitive to men and to women, everybody should have a mechitza. But there's an emes to it. It's not stomach an answer. Sometimes partitions allow energy not to be blocked. But what has to come through could come through, it doesn't. So the Ksav Sofer says, that's why when you see a pot, you have to anticipate peace. That's the Gedera. So you have to know what a mechitza does, what boundaries do. Now, Balio on Novi, what happened? The fire actually burnt the water when he made the context with the prophets and Malachim. Perik Yud Zayin, right? You know the story. Yeah. It's a long story in Tanakh, but the Nakuda of the story is he had a contest with the false prophets. They should sacrifice, he should sacrifice. Nobody brings a fire. He poured water all over his offerings, and then the fire came. Aneni, Elikim, Aneni, and Hashem hu Elikim, Hashem hu Elikim. They said twice. In Chumash it says Hashem hu Elikim only once. It says Hashem hu Elikim twice by that story of Eliyahu Hanavi. Hashem hu Elikim not once but twice. That was the result. When they saw that the karbonos were burnt, what happened there? The Eish actually didn't only coexist with the water, the Eish actually, so to speak, burnt the water, which is not Al Pi Teva. So when you read all these stories in the Tanakh, what's the impression? There's different types of impressions. Some people think it's all fairy tales, including some people sitting in this room. They've told it to me. They don't believe any of it. Some people believe it because they just believe it. They believe it, you know. It's like a puppet show. Tricks, good tricks. The makas and everything. We spoke about the makas. Some people, was heißt? Yeah, it says it happened. It happened. But there's a common denominator to all of us. The common denominator is it's a misunderstanding, not just of the miracles, it's also a misunderstanding of nature, of science. That's the chiddush here. That's what I want to explain. So take a look. V'kol zeh l'mayla min hateva. What's pshat? V'haynu mebchinas oirein soif habilti bal gvul. The piece between Mayim and Eish is a representation of Oirein Sof, which is not defined. She'ein sham hagbalas hateva klal liyosef b'chinas bilti bal gvul. Omnam hanhaga sa'olam al pi hagbala d'Shem Elokim. But that's not how the world runs. The world runs based on the finite limitations channeled through Shem Elokim, which is hateva. Hagam da Havayu Amahava the Choloi Savusai is Galus Koya Chapok, which because of Havaya Melech. Hashem creates Mikal Makim why they oid Havaya Commissioner the Shem Elikim B'chinas Helam Vest Lo B'chinas Gvul. It's Havaya channeled through Elikim. In other words, it's obscured. It comes in, it goes through a mechitza. It goes through a mechitza. V'uinyan Gvul Hateva Amayim Mechaber Veish Soif. Avram lived in the world. He didn't expect he's going to go in and there won't be a fire burning. Nonetheless, Avram said, I'm not backing off. This is truth. I'm not going to back off, and therefore I'm not going to be an idol worshiper. It wasn't easy for Avram Avinu. Avram didn't become a world-renowned teacher in the beginning. He was persecuted. He suffered terribly. He was facing all the concealments of the world. The world is a place of concealment. He didn't move. He didn't budge. He wasn't a spot. He knew the truth, so he wasn't affected. He was saved. What's pshat? He was saved. The saving started inside of him. In his mind, he removed the levushim of teva, meaning, the concealments of Elikim did not trap him. He touched the Nakud of Ein Sof, which is infinite. That became manifested in the world. And over there, fire doesn't have to burn. The canal, fire burns because of teva. Mitzad oirein sof itself, without elikim, fire doesn't burn. But precisely by standing through the test. The lululazos had an they gilu shem avaya shabad shem elikim. Without this, it goes through shem elikim. Shubchinas arechitzonis. Ubichdei sheyav legilu yamit shem avaya bilti balgul kamashul ma'ilum shem elikim. So I then nisyonis dafka. It's the nisayon of Avram, the test that paradoxically lifted up Avram Avinu beyond Shem Elokim. Why? Because what's the Nisayan? The Nisayan is where the Levush is trying to crush the person. The concealments, every test. The test is trying to, it could allure you into its trap, and you despair, and you become defined by the test. At that moment, the person stands at the vortex between Havaya and Elikim, between the concealments and between the truth, and I have to then make a choice in life. And every single type of test a person has, they're making that similar choice. In the regular day-to-day life, I'm not confronted with it in such a powerful way, even though I'm always confronted with it. But at a test, a person has to face a test, whatever that test is, a small test or a gigantic test. A person sometimes faces a test of something that causes tremendous pain and tremendous trauma and tremendous agony and tremendous discomfort. And it's easy for it's natural for the person to get sucked in by that, and that defines the person. And it becomes a real mechitza, a real blockage of life, a real blockage of joy, a real blockage of functionality, of happiness. That's always the moment when he has to make that choice. And he says, so to speak, cracks the code. Now, I want to take a few moments and explore what this means. I'm not going to explain everything that this means. I'm just choosing one angle with which to explain it. There are other angles with which it could be explained. I'm just choosing one angle. And I'm saying clearly it's one angle because this is a multi, as you can imagine, it's not a finite idea. So it's multifaceted and multidimensional. There's many ways through which to access it or gain some clarity to it. But I just want to choose one angle, one mahalach, that I think could give it a little more clarity or perspective, and then how it applies. There used to be an old question, they would ask it almost as a joke. But really today it's not a joke anymore, it's a real question, it has a real answer. And that is, when the tree falls and nobody is there, does it make a sound? Yeah, that's one of the old questions. The tree fell in the forest, but nobody was there. Happens all the time. Does it still generate a sound? So the natural answer of a child is, well, what's the difference? You were there, you're not there. It fell, it creates a sound. But today, we know that's not the case. It certainly doesn't create that sound that we're used to when we're hiking and we see and hear a tree fall. Why? Because the sound that we're experiencing is a marriage of two realities. The tree falling is one reality. And then there is the impact of that tree generates a certain stimulation. We receive a certain stimulation in our brain from that knack, from that bang. And the way it travels into our brain, and our brain interprets it by its traveling into our eardrums, that gives it this particular sound. So it's not the tree fell, it created some objective sound. The way this was absorbed by my audio abilities, by my hearing abilities, by my eardrums, that defines the sound of the tree. But this is one example that's true about all of reality. There was a very big physicist. He's considered one of the fathers of quantum theory, theoretical physics. His name was Max Planck. He won a Nobel Prize. I once read, he wrote It's obvious today. It's deep words. That consciousness is not a derivative of matter. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. Atkan. What does this mean? The way people always understood the world is matter is a fact. Matter means gashmis. It's a fact. This table is here. Don't tell me I'm crazy and we're all crazy. Then comes consciousness, how you interpret it, how you look at it, how you think of it. He says it's the other way around. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. The reason the matter exists is because I think it exists. Because we think it exists. It's the consciousness of matter that creates matter. Now this seems strange, right? What do you mean the consciousness of matter? So in the old days, if somebody would say this, they would, it's a very strange thing to say. Today, I think it's almost muskim. It's like the Chassidus of understanding anything about physics today. That all matter is a derivative of consciousness, which means it's the way my brain interprets reality. Now, many of our brains interpret reality the same way, which is why we can trust it. And we do trust it. We can trust that this is a table and do different things and trust it. But that doesn't mean, right, that it's an absolute objective reality. What it means is we all buy into the same Kool-Aid, which is fine in a certain context. Was machst du upon it?
It's not a tree. I just think it's a tree.
Is a tree a tree, or you just think it's a tree? So the real truth is that the tree is a tree because you think it's a tree. That's the truth. And that's not a lie. Even in halacha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz, and it's not a bracha levatala. Why? Because that itself is part of how Hashem created the brain. Our brain was created in a way that we look at this reality, right? And the way our brain defines it based on its own chemistry, it interprets it as a tree. Let me take another example. Take colors. This is the musical part of the shiur. We want to give you everything. Stimulate your ears, stimulate your eyes, stimulate your brain, etc.
You try to ignore it, see if it's not there.
Colors. Everyone always understood colors exist. This is brown, and this is blue, and this is gray, and this is white. Today, we know there's no such a thing as colors. The cook stuff is sugar, yeah?
Blue dress, the green dress.
There's no such a thing. Colors don't exist. They exist only in people's minds. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't make money. It can make a lot of money as long as all of us agree on the same thing. We'll buy it. It's fine. When we say it doesn't exist, I don't mean it doesn't make money. It can make a lot of money. It doesn't exist objectively. It exists as a result of the interpretation of our brain. I'll explain to you what I mean. This is important to understand. When you want to begin to understand the DNA of the universe, the DNA of the person, and the deeper dimensions of Judaism. I actually... No problem, I have it here. That's fine. A quote. I'll explain the quote. It's just another quote. It's a man named Paul King. He runs a center for what's called theoretical neuroscience. Theoretical neuroscience. You're bekannt with this discipline? These are cutting edge stuff today's world. It's interesting stuff. In California. Quote. The Chiddush is that these are not spiritual, religious thinkers. They are secular physicists. What we experience as color is not color. It's just the brain's way of making sense of the electromagnetic photons that collide with the photoreceptor array that is the retina in the human eye. I'll say it again. What we experience as color is not a color. It's the brain's way of making sense of something. Basically, there's electromagnetic photons, what do you call it, light waves, that collide with your eye. Every object I'm looking at releases what we call today light waves, depending on the light wave, right? And the cell that it hits in my eye, my brain says, that's red. You know, a few days ago there was a big eclipse. They said, go out 1 o'clock in the morning, you'll see a red moon. The moon didn't become red. The moon didn't become red. It was our interpretation. But when you say something is red, if we all agree that it's red, so we call it red. We don't, those of us whose brains function in a particular way, agree, yeah, that's true. Animals, for example, will have sometimes a completely, there are many colors we don't see. There are colors we do not see. Birds do see them. We have proof that birds see them. We don't see them. There are sounds we don't hear. Why are there sounds that we don't hear? Because we don't have the... A mazel, yeah. Because we don't have the kalim. The sounds we hear is not an objective reality. It's the way my eardrums, with the help of my brain, react to a particular sensation. This my eardrums don't detect. Or detect it, but don't have that interpretation of it. So therefore it doesn't exist. He writes like this: without the perpetual sense of vision, let me read this to you. It's quite interesting. Colors exist in very much the same way that art and love exist. They can be perceived. Other people will understand you if you talk about them generally, but they don't really exist in an out-of-the-world kind of way. Although you can make up objective definitions that make things like green, art, and love more real, the definitions are artificial. Green is light with a wavelength of a particular number. But these kinds of definitions are not actually things. There is a set of wavelengths of light that most people in the world, or many people in the world, will agree is red. But it doesn't mean the light itself is red. It just means that a human brain equipped with human eyes will label it red. Unlike love, though, colors we can study, and we could say without reservation, a colorblind person sees colors differently than a color-seeing person. When a photon, a light particle, strikes at the back of the eye, whether or not it's detected depends on what kind of cell it hits and on the wavelength of the light. So it all depends on the wavelength of the light that came to you and which cell it touched. We have 3 kinds of cells, which is pretty good for a mammal, each of which has a different probability of detecting light at various wavelengths. One of the consequences of this is we don't perceive a true spectrum. Our brains have 3 values to work with, and they create what we think of as color from those. However, some animals have different kind of cone cells and allow them to see colors differently, or to see wavelengths of light that we don't even see at all. It doesn't get registered by us. For example, many insects and birds can see into the near ultraviolet, which is the color we don't see, just beyond purple. Many birds have ultraviolet plumage because why not? They could see it. And many flowering plants use ultraviolet coloration to stand out and direct insects to their pollen. It's not for us to see because we're not attracted to their pollen. So what we experience as color is the brain's way of making sense of the electromagnetic photons.
We had the business with Yanni and Laurel.
Yes, Yanni and Laurel, exactly.
Blue and green.
Yeah.
Blue and green.
Yeah.
What does this help?
But in the two-slit experiment, you see that the presence does make a difference.
1 second. You want to know the mind nafkamina? It's a big nafkamina. Very big nafkamina. If one imagines, the same scientist from California, if one imagines what is really out there according to physics, basically, what we're describing is out there has nothing to do with what's out there. Without the perceptual sense of our vision, things don't look like anything. What is there? There's just a molecular structure out there in their environment. If you think what is really out there according to physics, objects are composed of atoms, which are just rubbery, structured, microscopic force fields occupying space. There is nothing inside them other than even tinier microscopic force fields. And remember, this scientist is only describing it according to his understanding of reality. They say that solid matter is 99.9% empty space. Because what is matter? Really, matter is made up of atoms, and most of the atom is empty space. So that's why they like to say that our whole planet and our whole universe, it's really, the matter, it's basically empty space. As they used to say, scientists would say, you could take the whole Earth and put it into your carry-on. You could take the matter of Earth, the gashmis of Earth, and put it into your carry-on. Now, that's a profound description. He says this is not true. It's actually 100% empty space. It's not 99.9. Space itself is not really a field at all. Okay. And he goes on in quite detail. What?
How can you live with this?
There were physicists who said, and again it sounds strange, when you leave your house, you leave your house, you go away for the summer. The house doesn't exist. I know, tell it to the IRS. Tell it to the electric company. Tell it to the telephone company. Tell it to house insurance. Somehow they don't agree with this. But that's exactly the point. We confuse what is easily accessed and interpretation with ultimate reality. When a person really the house that I observe is not objective reality. What do you mean it's not objective reality? The house I observe is a marriage between objective reality and my observation of it. It's my observation of it that turns it into a house. It's what my mind is capable of perceiving that defines the reality. So when I leave my house, it reverts to what it is on its own. What is it on its own? A realm of possibilities. That's what it is. So you'll tell me, what are you joking? We all see a house. I understand we all see a house. What it is a marriage between two things. There's the reality out there. The reality out there has nothing to do with the house. And then there is what my mind makes of that reality based on its own chemistry. In other words, when I'm judging reality, I'm never speaking about reality. I'm always speaking about myself. I'm speaking about my perception and interpretation of it. So I say this is red. It's not red. It's the way my brain interprets it.
Maybe people are also not reality.
Huh?
Maybe people are also not.
That's true. That's true. Now,
What is the reality?
But don't science and religion both require a leap of faith?
this doesn't require a leap of
I
faith.
think it does, because in order for me to believe what this secular physicist in Stanford is saying, I have to believe true. I have to accept his predicates, and I have to, it has to be a consent in my brain as to that information. And then my brain interprets it in a certain way. So
In that sense, yeah.
everything requires my story. I believe my story. And that's why I believe that there was no bifurcation between science and philosophy hundreds of years ago. It's only today that we have a separation between science and philosophy. So when this fellow stands, he doesn't believe in God. He's going to say that God is our consensus of what we hope to be true in some ultimate sense. So what did you point out one time? That belief begins where reason ends. There's a door that you walk through. All I'm suggesting here is, and I'm not insisting on it because it's just my story, right? There's a door that I enter when I listen to, and I've taken a class in quantum mechanics for non-physicists. They don't even agree on what a light wave is. So there has to be a consensus in order for me.
Right.
So how is that now? My question is, how does he differ from someone sitting in a class that has to hear about God, and he doesn't perceive God until he tries to perceive godliness? So how is what he's doing any different from a student sitting and trying to understand godliness?
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
I didn't say it's a contradiction. I said it's the same analysis that leads a person to believe that he
Good.
is.
Excellent point. I'll address it. There are people who are blind their whole lives. And why are they blind? This ability that we're talking about, the photons, the light waves, which come from every object, reach them also, but they don't reach them. And the reason they don't reach them is because of the optic nerves that are not functioning, or to different language, certain cells are not absorbing those light. Sorry, don't see anything. What did they figure out today based on this? Blind people who are seeing things, I can't tell you they see the world exactly like everybody else, but a lot of things pretty close. How'd they do it? How do they do it? They bring the information to the brain bypassing the optic nerve. They don't go through that keli anymore. We have a keli that absorbs the light, and the brain interprets it and says, okay, here's a person, here's a bookcase, here's a car moving, here's a door, here's a window, here's a garbage can, right? Here's a ditch. And that's how we function. That's the gift of vision, the gift of eyesight. The information coming from the object goes to the brain, it bypasses the optic nerve, and the brain can interpret it, and suddenly they see. The same is with hearing. There used to always be hearing aids, in our generation, hearing aids which basically amplify the sound. But now there's a whole new technology. Not hearing aids anymore. Completely different. What they do is a similar process. It's a keli that absorbs the sounds, but it bypasses the eardrums that by this person don't function. It bypasses it, it brings it into the brain, and the brain interprets it as a sound which is very similar to the sound we hear. So these types of observations and science have allowed us to be able to pinpoint and identify, at least to a significant degree, how all information, everything we call information, everything we call reality, everything we call real, is always a marriage of two things. It's the reality out there, the way it's processed and experienced by my kalim, by my vessels, by my levushim, by ours. And that imposes an interpretation on that reality, and we give it objective names because that's the easiest way to live. So we call this a table, and we call my house a house, and we call this color red, and art is sold for hundreds of millions of dollars because we all assume that this is red and this is blue, and the combination is pretty cool, especially if it was done by Van Gogh. Consensus. If we would have birds and insects, wouldn't pay that money for our art. Somehow.
Because they're missing the colors that they want.
Or because they have more colors. and if we would be able to see it as a light wave independent of our interpretation of it, it probably wouldn't be so artistic. Does this mean it's not true? It doesn't mean it's not true. It means that the truth of it exists only within a certain context. You understand what I'm saying? It's true. It's true. And that's why we can agree on it. But it's not the only truth. It's a limited way of defining reality based on a certain mold which our brains have. So there's certain cells. These cells pick up this light. The cells say, okay, this is the information I got. And the brain says, that's brown. There's another type of color. The brain says, I got nothing to say.
The color what the bird sees is true.
Of course it's true.
Nobody sees it.
No,
The
but
br-
you go to hearing, everybody
Of course it's
knows
true.
dogs can hear things.
Dogs hear sounds that we don't hear. It's very true.
Everybody knows this.
It's not true for me because I don't have the Caleb. That doesn't make it not true.
But your brown and my brown could be different browns.
That's true. That's true, of course. Because our brains, or many of our brains, function in similar ways, that's why we agree about so many things. For example, that this is a house. We happen to agree. But that's why they say if we happen to leave the house and there's nobody here, it's not a house anymore. It used to sound like a joke. It's not a joke. I know for the telephone company it's a house. I know for house insurance it's a house because they're still looking at it. They got it on their computer. But if the house insurance companies would also leave the house, it's really not a house. Why? It reverts back to what it is. What is it? What is it? Nothing what it looks like. It's really not a house. Here. Is this a table?
Yes.
It's not so pashut. What makes it a table? Your eyes decided it's a table, which is fine, because my eyes also decided it's a table.
When you leave the house, you have a security company to protect you.
Because the Ganav doesn't sit at my shear. If the Ganav would sit at my shear, then he would know that it's not a house, there's nothing to steal, there's only atoms to steal. But he doesn't come to the shear, so he weiß nicht. You know the Maisa? There was once a fox that was very, very hungry for lunch. And the fox saw the birds on the tree, and he saw a nice bird, and this is a good lunch. So he says, bird, come down, let's spend time together. He says, Mashiach? I come down, you eat me. He says, no. Today is your Maisa Mashiach. It's Mashiach Satan. Everybody says Mashiach Satan. And it says in the Navi, V'garza Evim Keves. The wolf will live with the lamb. The foxes will live with the birds. It's Mashiach's times. Come down. We'll live at peace. So the bird's here. It's beautiful. Wow, really? When did this start? It started. So the bird starts going down, and suddenly the hunters are coming with the dogs. And the fox sees the dogs and hears the dogs. I mean, the hunters are coming to get to hunt the animal. The fox starts running. The bird says, "Wo läufst du? Where are you running?" He says, "The dogs are coming. The hunters want to kill me." Well, you told me it's Mashiach's times. Everyone will live in peace, so why can't you live with the hunters and the dogs in peace? He says, yeah, but the hint gleiben ist der Mashiach. The dogs don't believe in Mashiach. Okay, to be continued.
Something missing.
Huh?
Something missing. The house
You have to have a little patience.
We see you heading to an Avram.
Huh?
Heading to an Avram being over his consciousness.
Yeah.
I presume.
Consciousness.
Hashem recreates
There's something
everything.
called hysterical blindness. People who were traumatized, typically in war, and from some terrible thing they saw, their brain, their optic nerve is intact, all their receptors are intact, but the brain refuses to process. And they're physiologically, organically whole with W.
But the brain will not
But the
process.
brain will not because of the trauma. They
And
have
that-
to go through psychiatry to overcome the trauma for the brain to start resuming seeing, processing images. There's nothing missing with them physiologically. It's called hysterical blindness.
And then this phantom pain.
There's phantom pain also. Yeah. And there's a little trickier because there may be shirayim of nerves. So they may have some physiologic basis. But this is mamish, no physiology.
The brain refuses
The brain
to.
refuses to process because it's been through some trauma of something it once saw. It's a myritic thing.
This whole thing ties into the trap of the thing.
It's not only with war, you know that.
The fact that
Yeah, we're getting somewhere. It's not. I just.
the fact that your red and my red are different reds means that our consensus is not even a consensus.
Right.
I brought it
It
up
means
today.
that
I learned with it earlier.
whatever you're saying you see and I see that I see, we agree. We agree that we're seeing the same thing, but we're not.
Right.
Which is a level below.
Yes. Because ultimately,
It's a pellet. You know, I was speaking to someone actually from Lubavitch, he's in the old city. I met him on the way to Kosovo, and he said a profound thing. He said, the whole world was created with Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Mimro, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And he says, we don't pronounce Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, we pronounce it Adonai. He said, Adonai, someone said, is really DNA. Adonai is DNA, so the entire world is DNA. So he said, one other half. He said that every DNA is a question of the chromosomes that are wrapped around two legs that are twisting each other. He said, I didn't verify this, so maybe don't spread it around until you verify it. He said that there are natural breaks in the DNA. You hear this? He said there are breaks in the DNA. Natural happens in every strand of the DNA. He says there's a break at 10, at 5, at 6, and at 5, which is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So says a Lubavitcher. You have to check it out. But you know, when you talk about these things, I spoke to, Gerald Schroeder. So I was speaking with him for a while, and I said, I'm struggling with this idea of Bechira. I mean, we all struggle with it, but, a regular is like, how do you reconcile? Because he's reconciled a lot of things, like Sheshes Precious and 14 billion years, and how do you pack that in? So he has some beautiful math that works out, because whatever, you can read his book. So he said something profound. He said, Einstein and his colleagues also had the same mistakes. And Einstein felt, he was a physicist, and he said, here is not shy. Because from the moment of the Big Bang, it's like a guy playing billiards who's an expert. He knows which ball is going to every pocket into the future. We, because of the laws of what we perceive as chaos, we can't predict. The Rabbi Shalom, in his endless wisdom, can predict every cell's interaction with every other cell ad sofer olam, and therefore, he knows if I'm going to pick up this book. So how? So where's Bechira? So Einstein felt that there's no Bechira based on the laws of physics. Comes this thing of quantum physics. And they all are in agreement now that there is room for a high degree of probability in nature, which opens up the entire realm of Bechira, which means that it's true there's a teva, and it's true there's physics, which is mukhrach, in that I'm going to pick up this book. But it says it's mukhrach that you're going to put your hand in a bag of apples. What's not mukhrach is what apple you're going to take out. Anyway, just food for thought.
okay, you have the Gemaras.